Have you ever felt trapped between love and fear, between loyalty and survival, or wondered why the choices of the heart sometimes seem to clash with the plans of life? This is the story of Michal, the daughter of King Saul, the first queen of Israel, and the wife of David, the man after God's own heart. It is a story of love, courage, pride, and the quiet tragedies that come when the heart chooses wrongly. Michal grew up in the golden halls of her father's palace, a world of splendor, power, and constant whispers of politics. Her life was surrounded by the echoes of royal decree, the clang of armor in the courtyard, and the soft rustle of fine fabrics in corridors where her father's mood could shift like the wind. From a young age, she observed her father, Saul, and learned that love and fear often walk hand in hand. Her heart, however, belonged elsewhere. Even in the midst of her father's grandeur, Michal found her eyes drawn to David, a young shepherd boy who had slain Goliath, whose courage and faith had captivated the hearts of Israel. He was unlike any man she had ever met, humble yet brave, joyful yet deeply devoted to God. When David first visited the palace, delivering the spoils of victory and the songs of triumph, Michal felt an unfamiliar flutter, a connection that went beyond admiration. She saw in him a soul untainted by the palace intrigues, a heart that mirrored her own desire for righteousness and love. Their love blossomed quietly amidst the danger that always seemed to linger near the royal family. Saul, tormented by jealousy and paranoia over David's rising popularity, sought to take his life. But Michal, wise and brave, became more than a lover. She became a protector. One fateful night, when Saul's guards crept through the corridors to capture David, it was Michal who devised a daring plan.
Quick, if they find you here, they will kill you.
David's heart pounded, not just from the fear, but from the thrill of seeing her courage, her willingness to risk everything for him. Michal let him escape through the window, lowering him down into the night with ropes woven from her own shawls. That night, under the stars, their bond was sealed, not just in love, but in loyalty, courage, and shared danger. Soon after, their marriage was arranged, but not without intrigue. Saul, hoping to ensnare David, demanded a bride price heavier than any dowry, the foreskins of 100 Philistines. David, ever fearless, delivered 200, securing Michal as his wife. Their wedding was a celebration not only of love, but of divine protection and providence. Michal, radiant in her joy, knew the price they had both paid, not just in blood and danger, but in the sacrifices their hearts had made to pursue righteousness. Yet even in the early days of their union, tension lurked in the corners. Saul's envy simmered, and whispers in the palace suggested that Michal's loyalty would soon be tested again. Her love for David was steadfast, but she began to sense the harsh truth that being the daughter of a king and the wife of a chosen man would demand more than affection. It would demand wisdom, patience, and sometimes heart-wrenching choices. Years passed, and David rose in prominence, shepherding the people of Israel, winning battles and inspiring devotion wherever he went. Michal remained by his side, a constant reminder of love rooted in courage, though her heart quietly bore the weight of her father's shadow. And then came the moment that would forever define their story, the bringing of the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. David, now king, had dreamed of this day for years. The Ark, the sacred symbol of God's presence, was to be returned to the heart of Israel. The streets of Jerusalem were alive with music, shouting, and the beating of drums as priests carried the Ark, its golden frame gleaming in the sunlight. David danced before it with abandon, clothed in a simple linen ephod, his joy unrestrained, unashamed, and utterly sincere. Michal watched from the palace balcony, her gaze fixed on the man she loved. And yet, in that moment, something shifted in her heart. She saw David's freedom, his humility, and his unfiltered worship, and she felt an unfamiliar pang of discomfort. Pride and expectation whispered in her ear, "Is this fitting for a king? Shouldn't he maintain dignity before the people, before me?" The crowd's cheers swelled, and David's laughter rang out like bells through the city. Michal's emotions twisted, love, admiration, confusion, and a faint jealousy all tangled together. And as the ark reached its place in the tent David had prepared, the scene was set not just for celebration, but for the unfolding of lessons that Michal herself would soon learn. And here, at the crescendo of Israel's rejoicing, our first part ends, at the moment when the ark is finally brought to Jerusalem, leaving Michal to grapple with emotions that would shape the rest of her life. The city of Jerusalem pulsed with life as David danced before the ark, spinning and leaping with a joy so pure that the people could not contain their own excitement. The streets echoed with singing, clapping, and shouts of praise, and the scent of incense from the priests drifted through the air, mingling with the dust of countless feet on the stones. From her perch, Michal watched, her heart a storm of conflicting emotions. She could not deny her admiration for David's bold devotion, yet a shadow of pride whispered sharply within her. How can a king behave so recklessly? She remembered the lessons of her upbringing, the dignity expected of a royal, the careful preservation of reputation. And yet, here was David, throwing all that aside in sheer, unadulterated worship. Her voice, usually so soft and yielding, spoke out before she could stop it. How glorious a king should appear, and yet he makes a spectacle of himself before the servants of the people, she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. Word of her disdain reached David, who, in the midst of his joy, turned his gaze toward the palace. He saw Michal, her eyes narrowed, her lips pursed in judgment. A pang of hurt pierced him, not for himself, but for the distance growing between them, the invisible wall her pride was constructing. Later, when the celebration had quieted and the people had dispersed, David confronted her gently. "Michal, did you despise me, seeing me dance before the Lord? I rejoice in him, not in the eyes of men. Why should you scorn what is holy?" Her retort was sharp, yet tinged with vulnerability. It was shameful for a man like you to expose himself like that. A king should be above such frivolity. David's heart ached at her words, not from insult, but from the realization that pride and misunderstanding had begun to corrode her spirit. His love for her had never wavered, but he knew that some lessons of the heart must be learned the hard way. And indeed, God's justice, subtle and precise, would soon make itself known. Michal remained childless, a sorrowful consequence that echoed through the halls of her life. The barrenness was not merely physical, but emblematic, a sign of the pride that had quietly taken root in her heart. She had loved David, yes, but she had allowed judgment, envy, and self-interest to temper her affection. In the quiet nights, she wrestled with the loneliness and the silent longing that would never be fulfilled. Yet even amidst sorrow, the story of Michal teaches profound lessons. Pride, left unchecked, blinds us to truth and love. Jealousy corrodes relationships that might otherwise flourish. Humility, courage, and sincere devotion are far more powerful than the fleeting approval of others. Despite her bitterness, Michal's life was not without purpose. She had helped David when he was most vulnerable, protected him from danger, and stood by him in a world that was often cruel and unpredictable. Her story reminds us that human hearts are complex, capable of courage and pride, love and resentment, devotion and blindness. In reflecting on her life, one sees the divine interplay of mercy and justice, love, and consequence. God honors courage and faith, yet he also corrects pride and teaches humility. Michal's barrenness was a painful reminder of what can be lost when one's heart becomes hardened, yet it also serves as a mirror to all of us, inviting us to examine our own attitudes toward love, humility, and obedience. Perhaps the most enduring lesson is that life rarely follows the neat lines we desire. Love may not always yield joy in the ways we expect, and loyalty may not always be rewarded in obvious ways. Yet, through every trial, God's presence remains, guiding, correcting, and calling hearts back to humility and righteousness. Michal's eyes, once sharp with judgment, may have softened in the years that followed, reflecting on her youth, her choices, and the man she had loved with all her heart. And though she bore no children, her story bears fruit in the lives of those who hear it, a caution, a reflection, and an invitation to embrace humility, to rejoice in sincere devotion, and to guard the heart against the subtle, insidious sway of pride. So, as the streets of Jerusalem still echo with the memory of David dancing, and as Michal's gaze lingers on a world she cannot fully command, we are reminded that life's lessons are rarely gentle. They come wrapped in joy, sorrow, love, and consequence. And through them, God calls each of us to examine our own hearts, to choose humility over pride, love over judgment, and faith over fear. This is the story of Michal, a woman of courage and flaws, of love and sorrow, whose life invites us to see both the power and the peril of the human heart.